Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. Pleasure to be with you on a Tuesday night. Later on this week, we're going to be broadcasting from CPAC back in Washington, D.C., and who knows, I might even see my friend Frank Gaffney in person for a change. Frank is the founder and president of the Center for Security Policy. And Frank, welcome back.
It's great to be with you, and I look forward to being with you in the flesh in a few days.
It'll be great. Now, let me ask you this. On Capitol Hill, one of the biggest decisions to be made right now is whether or not the president's emergency declaration, the House is likely to vote and say we're not going to allow this emergency declaration. Now, that'll likely be vetoed, and I don't think they have the votes to overturn the veto, and so that's that. But what's the cost going to be to America if we don't consider illegal immigration right now as an emergency for this country?
I'd qualify this just a little bit differently, Lars. What the House of Representatives will be voting to do is not just to countenance illegal immigration. It's going to be effectively affirming the permanence of a porous border, not just for people who are coming here for a better life or, welfare or whatever else, but people who are coming here to harm us. People who are coming here to bring in drugs, for example, that are killing 70,000 Americans a year. Mm-hmm. People who are bringing in other kinds of human and other sort of contraband, if you will. People who are probably coming here to do terrorist acts or preparing for them. People from hostile nations who wish to do us harm as well. That's the cumulative story here. And it is so irresponsible that the House of Representatives, and some say even the United States Senate, the Republican-controlled United States Senate, will pronounce that this isn't an emergency. Nothing to see here, folks. Move along. The reality is it is an emergency. And the president is absolutely right to declare it as such. He is within his rights to declare it as such. And we need to have that not only sustained by the Congress, but by the courts now as well, where it will ultimately, be disposed of.
Well, in fact, Frank, do you think there's any doubt that when this finally makes its way to the Supreme Court, which I would hope would be soon, that the Supreme Court will decide the president does have the authority to do this?
With the present makeup of the court, I think that's certain, but, nothing is. John Roberts has done some very bizarre things of late, so who knows? But I think the case law on this is clear. The law itself is clear. And if they simply follow the law rather than decide to make it from the bench, as is often done, as you know, by the courts these days, I think they're going to come out affirming the president's right to do this, and we will be, hopefully, at that point, in a position, if not before, to actually begin, finally, securing this border.
I mean, I guess I want to remind people of just some of the numbers. So you say, well, this has been going on for a while. Why is it so bad now to declare an emergency? Fiscal year 2019. All right, what we're in right now. DHS sees a 136% increase in the number of family units and unaccompanied kids trying to cross the border. In the last 2 years, ICE has arrested 250,000 aliens with criminal records, including those convicted of 100,000 assaults, 30,000 sex crimes, 4,000 homicides. Last year, ICE removed 10,000 known or suspected gang members already in the country illegally. And we've been seeing record seizures of drugs crossing our border. And Frank, it just seems if that isn't an emergency, something that, yes, crossing the border has been going on for a while, drugs crossing the border has been going on for a while, but has now reached an emergency state, and the Congress has said, we're not going to do anything about it. What else is the president to do?
Right. And, Lawrence, let me just say, we've had something on the order of 60 mostly longtime Democratic partisan national security practitioners weigh in on this question. And they seem to give very short shrift to the data that you've just described, which is, I think, compelling and accurate and very worrying. And instead, they say, "Oh no, there's no problem here. There's no emergency, folks. The Congress is well within its rights to tell the president that his emergency declaration is disapproved." I believe it's time for common sense. It's one of the things that the American people have long been blessed with in prodigious quantities. They need to apply it. It reminds me of the old line that Groucho Marx is attributed to things said, "You know, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes?" These folks want us to believe their lies. And the truth of the matter is, anybody with a lick of sense understands this is a moment when the border must have finally, across the appropriate places, not all of it, of course, but the appropriate places, effective barriers to penetration by hostile and other aliens who we do not want to have come here legally.
I think the president's number one job, and Frank, you know I'm not saying anything new, is national security. And we usually think of that in terms of nuclear missiles and armies and warships and things like that. But this is a practical national emergency when you have thousands of kids being dropped here, many of them sex trafficked into our country. You have, as you point out, the deaths of 70,000 Americans from opioids, and there's even a significant number of deaths caused by methamphetamine. And then we have the possibility of terrorist folks other than Mexicans, OTMs, crossing our border. If that's not a national emergency, I don't know what it would be.
Yeah. Well, and it's time to fix it is the point. Lars, you and I have been talking about this ad nauseum for decades. And the thing is, it's gotten to a pass where, as the president says, we won't have a country if we don't insist on our sovereignty and impose those effective barriers to penetration of the country's borders. This is the moment. If not now, I fear that it will be too late. And that's not acceptable, needless to say.
You know, the other thing that mostly Democrats, and there may be some Republicans who do this as well, have been doing is they use a kind of coded language where they say, we need to fix our broken immigration system. And that phrase has become so familiar, and yet I want to translate it, Frank, and you tell me if I'm wrong. They say it's broken. We let in more than 1 million people a year legally. Those folks then legally bring in millions more of their relatives and family members. And those people all come in legally. That's more generous than every other country on earth. And then folks who say it's broken say, well, if you don't figure out a way to let all the people who cross in illegally stay here legally, well, that's an open border. But they don't use the term open borders. They say, I'm not for open borders. I'm for fixing the broken system. I'm going to say they're constructively the same thing.
Well, they're deflecting attention from what they're really about, which is enabling people to come here and allowing the magnet that brings them here to continue to operate, whether that's jobs or whether that's welfare or whether that's education or whether that's healthcare or something else. But, Lars, here's the other thing to remember. As you know so well, whatever number we come up with based on the statistics of the numbers of people who are stopped and who are given asylum or otherwise, apprehended with drugs, that number is but a fraction of the number that's actually coming here and getting through. Those are just the people who are being intercepted. The numbers that are really coming across that southern border are vastly higher, I believe, than what we're being told, and we keep losing sight of that because we focus rather narrowly on the ones who get caught.
Frank, I'll see you later on this week at CPAC. That's Frank Gaffney, the founder and president of the Center for Security Policy.